Though I wish it wasn't so, I think that I'm a little genetically disposed to worry. I talk about the fact that I come from a long line of Swedish warriors in last week's video. It's a clip from the 10-week Bible study that goes along with my book, Having a Merry Heart in a Martha World. And I thought, you know what? I wanted to follow up with some practical tips on how we can break free of that fear. Because I can tell you from experience that God really does want to give us victory in this area. You know, I've come to realize that worry can almost become a habit. When something happens, unfortunately, our first thought is not always the Lord. A lot of us, just by personality type or even how we were taught by the way that our parents lived, we default to fear and worry. So there's a whole chapter in the book on overcoming fear. I wanted to share a sidebar that's titled, The Top 10 Ways to Tame Your Worry Habit. We're gonna move through these tips really quick, but hey, if you've got a tip that has helped you overcome your worry habit, I hope that you'll share it in the comments below, because there are way more than just 10, I know that. But here are the 10 that have helped me. A la David Letterman, I wanna start with number 10. Separate toxic worry from genuine concern. What's the difference, Joanna, you might ask? Well, toxic worry are those thoughts that just keep looping and looping and looping. It's that ruminating. It's that general fear that not only is about the situation at hand, but it morphs into fear about many, many things. So one of the things that has helped me is just to stop fear in its tracks and say, okay, Lord, first of all, is there anything that you want me to do about this? Because some things are outside my control, and yet I can bring them to the Lord and ask Him for wisdom. And as you ask Him for wisdom, write down a plan. If there are specific things that you can do, do it. Number 9, don't worry alone. Listen, this is a big one. I don't know about you, but my worry can be very interior. It can be very cerebral. And so I find myself in looping thoughts that are really less than helpful. So if you're like me, it may be helpful to talk to a friend or even a counselor. You know, I've found that as I begin to get it out of my head and verbalize it or even write it in a journal, sometimes solutions come to me that weren't there before. Which brings us to number 8. Take care of your physical body. Do you know that sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to take a nap? I mean, honestly, we can get so worn down by the cares of life and the busyness of life that we just don't have the emotional reserves or the mental or physical reserves to deal with the thing that is in front of us. When our bodies are healthy, our minds and our emotions are able to handle stress a whole lot better, and may I add, more appropriately. Now, the next point might come as a little bit of a surprise, but I think it might be really important. Number 7, do what is right. Now, we've talked about things that are outside of our control, but there are some things that we need to take responsibility for. If you have a damaged relationship because you flew off the handle or because you wanted to be proven right more than you wanted relationship, well, I want to encourage you to take it to the Lord and ask Him to show you how to make it right. Maybe you've messed up and you know you've messed up. Well, just nursing and rehearsing that regret is a heavy, heavy load that the Lord wants to help you to deal with, to take care of, to make it right. You know, the Bible calls us to live above reproach, that we would live in such a way that no one can say anything bad about us. Now, that doesn't mean we're perfect, but it means to the best of our ability, we're doing what is right, which means we don't have to constantly second guess ourselves because we know that we're doing what the Lord wants us to do. In Acts 24:16, Paul writes, "So I always strive to keep a clear conscience before God and man." That's a really good way to tame our worry habits. Number 6, look on the bright side. Yes, you guys, seriously. So much of our joy and peace is affected by the way we choose to view life. Many of us see everything through the lens of negativity. I want to encourage you to ask the Lord to heal your perspective so that you can see the good and not just the bad. That you're not constantly going to worst case scenario, but you're actually believing the best in people and for people, including yourself. Another thing about looking on the bright side, refuse to talk negatively, even about yourself. Ephesians 4:29 reminds us, let no unwholesome word come out of your mouth, but only that which is beneficial for the building up of others according to their needs. Let's look on the bright side. Let's be people that speak life and not death. Moving on to number 5, control your imagination. Oh my goodness, you guys, this is such a big one for me. This is where my worry habit can run amok because I'm imagining all of these things. I'm kind of trying to come up with solutions, but I'm also imagining worst case scenarios. In my mind, I'm already homeless and my kids are begging for food, even though I'm not even remotely close to that situation. But that's what fear does. Fear takes us to extremes. And so I found that when my mind starts running away, I have to say, no. In the name of Jesus, you get back here, because we're putting our hope in the Lord, not our fear in what might happen or what could be. Number 4, prepare for the unexpected. A lot of times our fear and worry is linked to sometimes some truth that we are not necessarily in the best shape we could be. Maybe our finances aren't where they ought to be. Maybe we know that we should be taking care of our diet and yet we're being careless about it and ignoring doctor's advice. You know what? That's going to feed fear. But when we do our part to prepare for the unexpected, whether it's laying up a cash reserve for emergencies or even just making sure that we have enough food for the week, then we don't have to live in that constant cycle of, oh no, I've got to remember to do this. Oh dear, what if we run out of that? We can rest secure because we've prepared for the unexpected. And here's another really big one. Number 3, trust God. Listen, troubles are going to come. Things are going to happen. Some bad things even can happen. They're going to be very real and they're going to be very immediate. But no matter what you're facing, you can trust God right where you are. He promises that He will never leave you or forsake you, that He cares about every single hair on your head, that He sees when the sparrow falls. And so how much more does He care for you? When you're going through something difficult, I want to encourage you, be sure that you add God to the equation. So many times I take God out of the equation and I believe the lie that it's all up to me. The first thing I really try to do is when fear comes knocking, I send faith to the door. I can say to fear, yeah, I see what you see. Yeah, it could go really bad, but I know that God is for us and He is with us and He will never let us down. Number 2, meditate on God's promises. Rather than ruminate on your fears, meditate on God's promises. When I was really struggling with worry, I actually went to the Word and I began to memorize verses on fear and on worry because I knew that I needed to rewire my thinking. I had stinking thinking. My default was fear, and I needed the Lord to help me renew my mind so that my first thought was faith. I love how 2 Peter 1:4 talks about the great and precious promises that God has given us in His Word that help us escape the corruption of this world, and I believe can help dismantle the fear that the enemy wants to use to keep us bound. So find a promise for your situation. Ask the Lord to give you a rhema word that you can stand on. And so that when fear comes knocking, not only do you send faith, you send the word of God to answer the enemy's accusations and all of its insinuations. Which brings us to the number 1 way to tame our worry habit. In fact, I've kind of been talking about it a little bit through all of these. Pray right away. Pray right away. Don't let your mind just go into these fear spirals. Instead, turn that worry into prayer by just adding 2 words, Dear Jesus, above your worry list, okay? He wants to be invited into the equation. He wants to help you overcome all of the obstacles you face. So don't let prayer be the last thought. Let it be the first impulse. Invite God into the equation. Stand on His promises and wait and watch for him to act, because I'm telling you what, he loves it when we trust him with things that feel impossible. It reminds me of that old beautiful hymn by Joseph Scribbins. He writes, "Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear, all because we do not carry everything to God in prayer." Something so powerful happens when we choose to pray rather than worry. We actually go to the one and only one who has the power to not only change the situation, but to change us. One of my all-time favorite verses in the Bible is Psalms 34, 4-5. "I sought the Lord and he answered me, and he delivered me from all my fears." Those who look to him are radiant, and their faces are never covered with shame. Well, I hope that one of these top 10 ways to tame your worry habit kind of sparked something in your heart. But as I mentioned at the beginning, I hope you'll share your tips for overcoming fear as well. Maybe you have a favorite verse. Maybe there's just a lesson that the Lord has taught you along the way. Let's encourage each other in the comments. If you'd like to learn more about my books and Bible studies, you can go to joannaweaverbooks.com. But I'd love to have you subscribe here on this YouTube channel. There's a beautiful community that's gathering here each week around the videos, and I'd love to get to know you better. Well, listen, I want to encourage you. There was a time in my life where I didn't know if I would ever be free of fear. But I can tell you, don't give up giving it over to the Lord, because He wants to rewire your soul and renew your mind so that your first thought isn't fear. Instead, it's this deep-rooted faith and security, knowing that you have a forever faithful Father who's looking out for you. God bless you, my friend.